all about controlled traffic farming today, how good it is and what sort of benefits it can give you and all that sort of stuff. But we now need to have a listen to what the economics of all that is to see whether it's going to be economically viable for your operation. So with that, I'm going to introduce James, who is an agricultural economist. He grew up on a farm in southern New South Wales, spent 4 years with Dafoe in Geraldton and has been based in Queensland for the last 2 years. James has worked extensively on subsoil constraints from compaction to sodicity to current work on subsoil nutrition. Today he plans on convincing you that people underestimate the cost of a CTF system, but that you should convert anyway. So here you are. James, it's yours.
Thanks. So I've had some really good information about CTF today, but I'm going to go right back to basics. Before I do though, how many were already convinced?
Here, aren't
they? Yeah, no, lower the better. Lower the better, it gives you more room to work with. So, just to get something out of the way quickly, most of the work I'm going to speak about today, based on GRDC, CRC, USQ, UQ, UWA, just a whole load of research institutions that have done all the background work on this compaction, and I'm just lucky enough to speak about it. All right, so historically, what a wonderful graph. Adoption of controlled traffic has been high in basically northern New South Wales, southern Queensland, up to northern Queensland, and it's because, as you can see, probably 50, 60, 70% up through there, stored soil moisture, summer rain, great thing. You get 280 mils in the soil, you know, you put a plant in and guaranteed crop, job done. Less so over here, 5% maybe, historically. And whilst I'd like to take credit for that uptick recently, as part of the controlled traffic project, it's really due to one of the things I think Rowan said earlier, is we've been having those hot, dry gaps of 6 to 8 weeks in the middle of the growing season, and it's your ability to access that stored plant moisture that's basically the difference between getting a crop and not. Now for back to basics. Basic number one, 10 tonne of soil or 10 tonne of axle weight will compact below 30 centimetres. I assume you all agree with me. I'm an economist, I'm allowed to do that. Knowing that, here's a list of basic machinery on most of your farms, maybe not quite the 620 horsepower, but most modern machinery will be above 10 tonne axle weight. So, rule number one, 10 tonne compacts below 30 centimetres. Rule number two, you're driving over with more than 10 tonne currently. Basics. Now, who had the question earlier about joules or spreading out weight over larger areas? It's yours? Okay. What I've got on the screen now are penetrometer readings taken across the face of a soil from a cotton picker. Weighs about 38 tonne loaded. Left side is singles on 3 metres, right side is joules. You can see there's a difference at the surface because we've got those established control traffic lines, and surface compaction underneath the joules is lessened. But down here, where we're really worried about the compaction because we can't remove it easily, that's the real, so subsoil compaction is not helped by increasing the surface area of your wheels at the surface. Not a basic, but question answered, I hope. So this is actually taken on a black cracking vertisol that in typical times would self-correct, would heal itself. These readings were taken a year after the initial pass of traffic had occurred. It was done as part of a project with USQ from John McLean Bennett there. And visually on the soil, you could see that it was cracking, the soil had dried out, it had its wetting and drying cycle, and that's why you've got this top layer that's, you know, relatively compaction free. Like anywhere it's blue, no problem for plant growth. But despite that basically at 40 centimetres, where we've got the joules, even with the self-correction, it hadn't corrected down to there yet. So that's really the issue we're having in lots of, not just cotton systems, that's only 2 tonne more than a fully loaded Class 9 header. We're having it that compaction to depth doesn't self-correct quickly, and on those soils ripping it isn't really an option, although in saying that in a cotton system where they're doing 12 bales a hectare, $6,000 a hectare in income, they're happy to put a dozer over it. Right? So, and even some of them refuse to go CTF, and it's a bit difficult there because they've got a 6 metre width front, they're limited by that in the first place. But this is the basics is that with heavy weight, it's getting into the subsoil. Subsoil doesn't self-correct quickly. And just a classic example of root growth, I'm not sure if that stands out correctly, but this is the 3 metre system. You can see there's lots of laterals coming off that cotton plant. This one, in the dual side, nothing. And just to make it more relevant to you guys, here's one from Binu 2 years ago when I was working up there. Ripped this side, unripped this side. It's, you know, night and day. So, with all that evidence, you all agree with me that 10 tonne causes compaction below 30 centimetres. All the machinery we've got there is over 10 tonne axle weight. Why is adoption so low? Oh, and we can see the obvious benefits. The big one I always hear is cost. You know, this is just some rough figures for what a new 36 metre boom spray. It's probably a bit cheap there. If you can get that, probably, you know, hook in. Add 10%, you're probably closer. But people look at that and say, well, how can I afford to move to a CTF system? And I say, well, you're going to replace them all anyway, and here's what it costs you in a CTF system. Here's what it costs you without a CTF system when you replace it when it hits your 6,000 hours or whatever you're going to replace it at. There's the cost when you replace it for your CTF system. No difference. Putting the cost of machinery against a CTF system is pointless. It's stupid. Only thing you should be putting against it is the wheel extensions if you need to do them, any modifications that you need to do on top of that, or cost of spaces, etc. Straightforward, but you know, people still get put off by the upfront cost that they're looking at there. So what I'm going to tell you is the upfront cost is irrelevant because it's negligible. But the intro did say I was going to tell you people underestimate the cost of CTF. And they do. The example I'm going to go through here is of moving someone with a 12 metre header, 13.7 metre bar, 30 metre boom spray to a fully matched 12 metre system. And the real cost people ignore in CTF is opportunity cost. Timeliness remains key in everything. If you're sacrificing timeliness for something, you need to be guaranteed that you're getting a payback for it. I'm going to use the example of the cedar, but in the paper I'll go through all of them. And because I'm an economist and I like nice round numbers, you're operating at 10 kilometres an hour. Why not? So roughly 12 metre machine versus 13.7, 14 hours a day seeding, fuel efficiency of 0.8, which means you spend 20% of the time refueling, reloading, changing fields, etc. Rough difference is about 20 hectares a day. So to seed a 4,000 hectare program, System number 1 is going to take 4 more days. If those 4 days are outside your optimal seeding window, we know you lose 0.5 to 2% of yield potential per day once you're outside that window. Which ends up being roughly 59 tonne in the example I gave there at 1%. At $250 a tonne, it's about $15,000. That's going from 13.7 to 12 metres. Now, sure, you can run for 16 hours a day on the 12-metre bar and still get it in on time, but that's just a straightforward comparison saying that's the cost most people don't look at. Similar figures can be done for spraying and harvest. So spraying, it's about $3.50 a day from most of the research I've seen, which isn't much. There's some from Canada and some from New South Wales. $3.50 a hectare per day. And harvest, similar range as that 0.5 to 2% penalty. All right. From the rough math there, $15,000 is what you're down from going to that 13.7 system. Assuming you don't work longer, because who wants to work longer? But there has to be benefits going to offset that. We've heard all about them today, which is really when you pore space, which is what the compaction is, the reduction in pore space. When it isn't reduced, you've got better aeration and better ability to store moisture. And when you've got better ability to store moisture, you've got better access to subsoil nutrition as well. So when the ground's wet, you can uptake nutrition. Better drainage and better soil water. So it's actually worked out really well. Everyone's covered what I wanted to say there. Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Good teamwork. Haven't seen this one mentioned so much, but big one for efficacy. Lower dust, faster speeds, depending on what your inversions are like. This one can be both, beneficial or not. I'm thinking I've seen some of Trev's stuff from when he's tried to go in a bit early and gone off the tram lines and probably isn't as beneficial then, and this is the other one, which is better power to the ground. So your horsepower requirement isn't as much, which means you're not wasting as much horsepower moving your machine. That's that rolling resistant stuff Jeff was talking about earlier. All right, let's put some numbers on the benefits. If you've been in WA for any time or any compaction talk in the last 20 years, you've probably seen a version of this graph. It's based on Paul Blackwell's work in 2000, where he did some ripping and unrips and just showed the wheeling effects, wheeling penalties on yield. And so those penalties range from about 40 to 15%, depending on what yield it was. And one of the things I've learnt moving from southern New South Wales to here to Queensland is everyone likes to think that their farming system is different and that nothing could possibly apply to different places. So we're different here, it must be a bit different. So instead of just Paul Blackwell's, here's our list of observed penalties from Western Australia to Queensland, Western Australia, back to Victoria and southern Victoria there. So sands, black cracking clays, sandy duplex, loamy sands, more vertisols, sandy loams, clays and sands. Our penalties, 50% if we just measure the trafficked, 50% again. And then let's start looking at total paddock penalties, 37, 26, 37, up to 22, 25 and up to 16. They're actually fairly consistent across the board. And I think Rob said earlier when he was doing his thing of going back from 43 to 30 something, just used a 30% figure. And that'd be pretty accurate because you're looking at, on a sand, like 37%. All right. So this is what we've gone from. That 12 metre header, 13.7 bar, 30 metre boom spray, about 38% coverage. That's without any joules or anything. To about this, assuming 900s on the header, you're about 14% coverage on a fully matched 12 metre system. Simple enough to work out what the difference in penalty is. Worst was 38, now 14. I'm actually going to go lower and be conservative and say there's only a 20% penalty for running over something. Equals about 5% across the field. So over a 4,000 hectare program, assume we're somewhere medium-ish rainfall, getting 2 tonne a hectare, about 400 tonnes, 250 bucks a tonne, about 100,000 bucks a year. Which I think works out pretty similar to what his calculations were. All right. The paper will go into how each of these has been calculated totally, but machinery modifications, I've put that at 100K, which is $50,000 in modifications, and then $50,000 in increased service costs. So $5,000 a year over 10 years in increased service costs, and $5,000 a year just in depreciation of your modifications that you've done. So we've got about a cost of 10,000 bucks a year in machinery modification. We're losing that 15,000 bucks from just dropping back from that 13.7 to the 12 metres, so the seeding time has been delayed. So there's a penalty there for timeliness. You pick up a bit in your spraying. That's at 4 sprays a year, I'm pretty sure I calculated that on. Net, you're still behind about 5,000. But that traffic yield penalty, every year, plus fuel use of about $20,000, dropped back. Massive improvement overall. So whilst no one normally counts these costs, they're actually normally never big enough to make up for the benefits you receive from CTF. If I just go back, one of the reasons we need to rely on these numbers is when people convert to CTF, it's a whole farm conversion. So as you said, they might see the improvement, but it's very difficult to measure improvement on your own farm if you're fully CTF. Unless you buy the neighbour's place and then you see the difference. So most of the research we've seen within Australia shows definitive results. Some of the modelling suggests that basically 1 in every 3 years it won't make any difference, because you can grow a crop on 10 centimetres of soil if you get consistent rainfall and you keep the nutrients up to it. So having access to stuff at depth, if you've got consistently good rainfall, probably not as big a benefit in those years. Or the reverse, where you don't get any rainfall at all, then having a bigger bucket makes no difference. Now for the fun one. Because timeliness, you don't need to be pedantic about CTF systems. If you need to go bigger to get your seeding program in on time, or to get your spraying done on time, you can make minor changes. So in this case, we're going to a 60-foot bar instead of a 40-foot bar. Increases our coverage by about 4%, but gives us 30% extra seeding capacity. So you have to do the numbers based on your own system, because it will depend on where you are. But there's no need to be pedantic. Like, CTF is really just about getting that coverage as low as is manageable for you. And here's just a beautiful picture of root growth versus not much root growth. Cheers.
Thanks, James. I'll just ask a really quick question.
Yep, so if you look at this case, right, this is a ripped one at Lake Varley versus unripped at Lake Varley. So the difference between the end of this blue line and this blue line, that's the ripping benefit. The difference between this blue line and there is the wheeled penalty in a season on a crop that hasn't been ripped. Between this purple line and this blue line is the damage done in one pass on ripped country. Yes. Yeah. If you have a look at the actual paper, the Southern Farming Systems one has a number of run lines where they've done row by row and measured out what the penalty is for in-season, like penalties from high intensity like spray runs, as well as the other penalties from seeding and harvest runs as well. So for these, it's not consistent.